Since 2009, Abahlale Base Mujondolo, a community organization dealing with land, housing, and other social justice issues which affect shared dwellers throughout the country, has lost 25 of its members, and only 3 of the 25 activists have received justice through the arrest and sentencing of their killers. In South Africa, human rights defenders are facing unprecedented threats to their lives and freedom. From harassment and intimidation to assassination attempts, these brave individuals are paying the ultimate price for standing up against corruption, inequality, and injustice. In this video, we expose the shocking reality of the attacks on human rights defenders in South Africa and explore the reasons behind this disturbing trend. Watch to find out more about the courageous men and women fighting for a better future in South Africa and why their work is more crucial than ever. Hi Rufo Nature family, and welcome to another video. Welcome to those of you who are new and have just joined the fam. It is so good to have you here. Today's video is about a topic that is actually close to my heart: the protection of human rights defenders. This is something I briefly touched on the video on pros and cons of being an environmental activist lawyer, and if you haven't watched that video yet, please do so. I'll link it down below. So before we continue, just a reminder that Rufo Nature is available on Instagram and TikTok. So if you do not follow us there, please head over there and connect with us on those platforms too. Also, if you haven't heard, we now have a website. So this is a place where you can find resources on the topics that we discuss here, especially for those of you who preferred written notes as well. You asked and you were heard. So please have a look at the website and join the community from there as well. I'll link it down below. Now, to start, what are human rights defenders? Human rights defenders is a term that is used to describe people who individually or with others act to promote or protect human rights in a peaceful manner. Thus, it is a person who acts to address any human rights or rights on behalf of individuals or groups. They seek the promotion and protection of civil and political rights, as well as the promotion, protection, and realization of economic, social, and cultural rights. So since Rufo Nature is a community on environmental protection and sustainability, a person who strives to protect and promote human rights relating to the environment, including water, air, land, flora, and fauna, is known as an environmental human rights defender. Numerous development projects are being approved across the country, and most of these projects, such as mining and oil and gas extraction, are being authorized in communities that are already rife with poverty and suffering from various social injustices and inequalities such as unemployment, lack of education, inadequate service delivery, and limited access to healthcare. So as we discussed in our mining and environment series, if you haven't watched it, please go and watch it. I'm also going to link it down below for you. Most of these development projects have detrimental impacts on the environment, especially where they're not undertaken in a responsible manner or the law is not complied with and enforced. So the negative environmental impacts such as water pollution, air pollution, soil contamination exacerbates the already existing inequalities in these affected communities. It depletes the water resources, resulting in limited access to water for people and their livestock. The pollution affects people's health in areas where access to healthcare is already a problem and people cannot afford. These activities also have socio-economic impacts such as loss of livelihoods, especially in mining affected communities where mining often displaces other economic activities in those areas. Also, things like teen pregnancies and the spread of HIV and AIDS are quite common and rife in these areas. So this basically creates a social and environmental injustice in itself. As a result, a lot of communities have started to take a stand against development projects that are threatening their lives and damaging the natural environment. As we know by now, everyone has a right to an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being, and to have that environment protected for both present and future generations through reasonable legislation and other measures. Public participation, a cornerstone of our constitutional democracy, is one of the ways in which the environmental rights can be exercised. That is, affected peoples actually being given the opportunity to voice out their concerns and opinions and have a say on the type of development projects they want in their communities. This is the right that these communities seek to enforce. And currently, although the law requires meaningful participation, in reality, this is not being done. Public participation is being done as a tick box exercise. Some companies pick and choose who to consult, for example, consulting the village chief instead of the whole community, particularly women. And where projects have gone ahead and have negatively affected people, when people decide to take a stand and hold the perpetrators accountable, laws are not being properly enforced. Essentially, what these communities want is their voices to be heard, and for them to especially have a say in the kind of development projects that they want in their communities and how it should be done. Over the years, activists defending the rights to a healthy environment and other human rights have been facing numerous threats for taking a stand to protect their rights. Threats to activists include executions, torture, beatings, arbitrary arrest and detention, death threats, harassment and defamation, as well as restrictions on their freedoms of movement, expression, association and assembly. The negative impacts of certain development activities such as mining, they affect people's lives, and yet they are being silenced when they voice out their concerns and want to have a say on the type of development that they want in their communities. The Business and Human Rights Resource Center recorded more than 3,100 attacks on human rights defenders worldwide between January 2015 and May 2021. And these attacks were against community leaders, farmers, workers, unions, journalists, and civil society groups who raised alarm on irresponsible business practices. There definitely has been an increase in the number of human rights defenders who are losing their lives as a result of their activism with impunity. Despite these killings being reported to the authorities, there's been no justice for the majority of the defenders who were assassinated. The criminal justice system is failing to protect and safeguard human rights defenders from threats, leaving them vulnerable to violence without recourse to justice. So from how we have defined human rights defenders, you can see how they play a significant role in upholding our constitutional democracy and standing up for what is just for all people. When the state fails to protect them, it undermines the justice system as a whole and the very foundations of our constitutional democracy, which is built on human dignity, equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedom. Like those who fought against apartheid, human rights defenders fight to protect the rights and freedoms that we sought to gain when our predecessors fought against apartheid. What was the point of fighting for it when once we get it, we are unwilling to protect it? Human rights defenders not only advocate for the protection of these rights, but they are also a watchdog for our constitutional democracy to ensure we do not go back right where we started, where human rights violations were committed with impunity. When the state and law enforcement fails to protect human rights defenders, it sends a message that those who stand up for justice do so at their own peril. This discourages participation, undermining the very foundational values of our Constitution. The failure not only endangers the lives of defenders, but it also erodes trust in institutions that are meant to protect us and uphold justice and equality for all. It is therefore essential for authorities to uphold their duty to protect all citizens, including human rights defenders, and ensure that their rights are respected. Every October, activists from across the country gather in solidarity to call for the protection of human rights defenders and call for legislative measures to specifically protect human rights defenders. This call is aimed at stopping the increased rates of killings, threats, and other acts of intimidation against human rights defenders. The threat to human rights defenders is actually very real, and the state's silence on this is deafening. There is a need for sufficient legal and other measures to be put in place to ensure the protection of human rights defenders. Everyone's lives matters. We cannot go around threatening and killing people just because they hold a different view from you and are standing up for what is good for the society at large. Ultimately, most of these people are the people who are directly affected by the negative impacts of these development projects. They should have a say. Their voices should be heard. Their lives should be protected. At I Root for Nature, we stand in solidarity with all human rights defenders across the globe. We do not support the threats and intimidation tactics being used against human rights defenders or their uncalled for killing. We call upon governments across the world to protect human rights defenders and put in place adequate legislative measures to protect them. We call upon law enforcement agencies to properly enforce the law and hold perpetrators accountable for their actions that pose a threat to human rights defenders. We bemoan those who have lost their lives in the fight for justice and the protection of human rights. Your memories are forever in our hearts, and the fight continues. A luta continua.